Here's the story of a man who, from an early age, wanted to work because he wanted to be successful. The story mostly takes place in 3 communities in northern Utah and crosses paths with many of the most successful names of all of those locales. And from this devout work ethic brought this man, kind of by chance, into the golf history of this state. This is one human being dedicated to a goal: success in life from your hard work. We are all fortunate that the turn of events brought him into the business of golf. And now, more than a half-century later, not many have been a part of this great game for as long as Dean Ralph Candland. Dean Candland was born in Ogden, Utah, the 3rd child of Emily and Hayden Candland on December 12, 1929. His other 2 siblings passed away from illness early in their lives, and at age 8, his mom died from a brain tumor. Dean's dad, a railroad engineer by trade, did eventually remarry, and he now has a half-brother, Richard. Despite these truly big family tragedies, he had what he describes as a regular childhood growing up on East 27th Street in Ogden. Baseball, kids' games, lots of friends. In fact, how about this? One of his best friends from an early age, Tommy Williams, who he played high school golf with eventually and won a golf championship at Ogden High School with. Tommy would eventually follow Dean into the professional job at Brigham City. About living in this Ogden neighborhood growing up.
I'll tell you what a good neighborhood we lived in. I lived right across the street from Brent Scowcroft. Grew up right across the street from him, National Security Advisor. Yeah, that's big. And Arnie Farron, he lived just up around the corner.
His father worked long and hard, and young Dean Candland was also a worker at an early age. He once told of having 5 jobs at the same time before the age of 19. But first, we're here to talk about Dean and golf. How did he get started in the sport?
Well, a neighbor of ours, Cy Matthews, and for some reason he thought I looked ambitious, that maybe I wanted to go out and caddy, and I didn't have a clue what caddying was until I got there.
I mean, so you'd never even done anything with golf? Never?
No, no. Well, and I kind of liked that, so then I could make some money, so it was pretty good. In those days, it was 9 holes, and we'd get 35 cents a round, and they'd usually carry double, and we'd usually end up getting $1. In those days, Ogden had more famous families, more prestigious families, and then Salt Lake did, for hell's sakes. You had the Scowcrofts and the Bennings and the Eccles. And it was funny in those days. Washington Boulevard, these guys there was a bunch of guys from down Salt Lake. They'd fly their plane up, and they'd land on the dirt road, which is now Washington Boulevard. There between the roads.
At Ogden Golf and Country Club, Dean Candland worked under his mentor, as he calls him, Ernie Schneider Sr. Dean would caddy until a little older, and then he loved working on the grounds and the course. This would later prove very beneficial as he got his first real golf job. At age 16, he also worked for the Southern Pacific in the railroad business. He was a cook at Rusty's Drive-In in downtown Ogden. Later, he'd also work at 2nd Street. Now that was government work. So all of these jobs, plus he had to graduate from high school in good standing to avoid military service. Around this time, he did meet his wife, Peggy, at Ogden High, and they were later married. Building seniority in the railroad business and government employment is hard for a 19-year-old to leave. But the mentor, Ernie Schneider Sr., had different ideas for Dean Candland in March of 1949.
Ernie got a hold of me during the winter, and he told me he'd been going up to Brigham City, and he'd build a golf course up there. And I said, oh, yeah, I didn't really believe what he was telling me, but by the time springtime came along, well, he loaded me in the car, and he said, well, we're going up, and I'm going to show you. And so we went up there, and we got out of the car. It was in the first part of March, and he showed me this golf course, but it was just it was a pasture. It hadn't been cut down to a golf course yet, but he had the greens mounded up, but they hadn't been cut down, but there was grass all over everything, but nothing was cut much. But he said that he assured me that there was going to be a golf course there as soon as I put my touches to it. And they'd hauled in an old building from Bushnell Hospital to be the clubhouse. He says, but you can do it. And I says, well, how am I going to get this job you're talking about? And he said, well, that's the next thing we're going to do. So we went uptown and we started making calls and introducing me. I was 19, looked like I was about 16, and he convinced him how smart I was and what a great touch I had on being able to make this into a golf course, because they were dubious to whether this was ever going to be a golf course or not, but they kept telling them it would.
So then you had to actually then at that point then come up and build and do all that.
Cut this thing down and turn it into a golf course, yeah, in a matter of a couple of months, which we did. We got them playing on the 1st of June, and Ernie and a bunch of the members, people down in Ogden came up, and we had a inauguration, of the golf. We opened the golf course, and so I ended up being the ground superintendent and the clubhouse manager and the golf professional.
That's right. Dean Candland was really in the golf business. Was he ready for this end of the golf business? Golf professional at an all-new course?
I didn't have a clue. First thing I knew I had to do is I had to get some inventory. I had to open up a golf shop, and I had to have inventory, and I had to have golf clubs, clothing, and stuff like that. But there was one problem: I didn't have any money. So I went to the First Security Bank, and they told me they'd loan me some money if I'd get a cosigner. So I got 2 cosigners, the local druggist and the local seed store owner. And they co-signed for me for several years.
But as we know now, it all worked out. Brigham City had their new golf course, and their young, excited, energetic, and workaholic golf pro, Dean Candland. Touching with successful entrepreneurs again, his first home in the Peach City, rented from the D. Glenn Smith family. Already such a young man who had been around lots of successful people, and it was all sinking into this growing up fast Dean. Lots of good advice, because he knew.
I could see being poor and being rich, and it looked to me like rich was better.
It didn't take long, and he was firmly established in the golf business. He grew a pasture into a course, not with just players, but organizations, men, ladies, juniors, tournaments, and a golf club. Brigham City was proud. Dean was too. Problem is, when you get more successful, some don't handle it like others. Dean admits in his later years in Brigham, early 1960s, that the mayor and the city council thought he was too financially successful on their golf course. And that dispute over a contract eventually led him to the Logan Golf and Country Club. Now head professional at LG&CC, Dan Roskelley remembers Dean's arrival.
We were little 13-year-old kids. Used to come up the golf course. Our moms would shoo us up here about 8 o'clock in the morning when the wind's blowing 50 miles an hour and the sprinklers on. And Dean came over from Brigham City, and we'd always had Ken Vanderhoff as the golf professional before then. And he was mean. He scared us to death. And they had a daughter named Gretchen who was even meaner. And Dean came over and he was pretty nice to us as young kids. We were, as all 13-year-olds, probably pretty much of a pest to a golf professional, but he treated us great right from the start, and he's really the golf professional that got most of us interested in playing more.
Brigham City Golf and Country Club for 14 years. He'd stay at Logan 28 years. Head professional a long time. But as only Dean Candland's mentality operates, his feelings of being a golf pro?
Golf was, to me, was golf, it's a job. It's my business. I can't say that I have all this fondness for, golf is a business, and my business was moving people. I had to get people around that golf course. People came to my course to play golf, to have fun and play golf. And I had to help. I made it possible.
Dean may have been moving those people, but he also touched so many golf lives through those years. The pro, Dean Candland, has an impressive pedigree chart of current golf professionals that he worked with, coached in his 13 years as Utah State's University golf coach, or just being someone's mentor or teacher. One of all three of those classifications is the current head professional at Logan River Golf Course, Jeff John.
He had some players that he coached that are probably head golf professionals someplace, like Ray Areno and people like that. Myself, Tommy D, Dale Erickson, John Evans down in Cedar City, Danny, Ross Kelly, Duffy McFarland, Ken Easton, Craig Sarlo. That's just to name a few. There's been a whole bunch. So, but just of the people that I know, that's 7 or 8 I've listed right there, and that's a pretty cool accomplishment. I bet you about double that many that are probably assistants or work in some capacity in the golf business that have worked around Dean Candland.
The Logan River Golf Course. Planning, development, constructing, opening, and operating. Dean Candland was a major part of the committee who got all that done and accomplished. He is very proud of a golf course welcoming people to Logan, Utah, as they enter the south side of the city. As the man who succeeded him after Dean's retirement at Logan Golf and Country Club in 1992, here's Dan Ross Kelly again.
I just learned an awfully lot from him then, and our relationship, our friendship, I think, has grown a lot since I came back down. He's, without saying much, he has known that I've needed help here and there, and he's not one to come and offer his opinions, but in a way he does that, and so he's been great to have, and he's a lot more relaxed now that he's not doing what I'm doing, so he gets in his shots teasing me about the pressures and some of the things that I go through, and it's just great to have him around. It could be an adversarial position to have a retired golf professional always looking over his shoulder and saying, well, I would have done it this way, or he should be doing this, and Dean has never for 1 second done that here. He's been nothing but a great support.
Earlier, you heard Dean Candland's thoughts on being a golf pro, but he still loves the game. He says as much as when he was a kid. And he could play. Ogden City Junior Open champion, 1945. Semifinals of the United States Junior Open in Spokane, Washington, 1946, losing to eventual tour player Al Mengert. In the early days at Brigham City, he would play a lot on the circuit. 2 close associates then, 2 more really prestigious people touching his life, touring pro George Snyder and banker Walter Cosgriff. They would travel around the West playing tournaments. Dean will always remember the vision and charisma of George and the helpful financial wisdom of Walter. Best friends all come from golf. Pete Randall, Lanny Nielsen, Jerry Comer, and of course, still Tommy Williams. Besides all of this professionally, Dean and Peggy Candland are proud parents of 2, Scott and Jill. Both live in Salt Lake City, and they have a married grandson. Dean and Peggy now spend 3 months each year in the same area in Palm Desert, California, escaping Utah in January, February, and March. They have traveled all over the United States for golf trips and more, plus to China and Europe. They have Norway planned soon. They have taken USU history tours with Dr. Ross Peterson. They play bridge together and enjoy the cultural events in Cache Valley. Besides the golf business, Dean also did pretty well in rental properties at one time. And then how about his horse owner stage? A neighbor, Jim Boatwright, got him into owning and racing. 6 racehorses were owned and run in El Paso, Phoenix, and Evanston, Wyoming over those years. The best was High Creek. He ran out $100,000. He reads lots of mysteries and follows the NBA. Dean is also a health nut, always eating right and exercising, and that brings us to one of his true devotions, handball at least 3 times a week since the 70s. And then he's still playing quite a few rounds of golf. But he's really in his element when he's beating the balls on the range. It's still a workman's pursuit to improve, get better, discover something new, be successful. That is the life of Dean Ralph Candland. As wife Peggy says, we've lived the way we've wanted to live. He was a professional who worked in the golf business. He's touched so many lives in a positive way involving the great game of golf. Thank goodness that's where his great work ethic led him. To all of us. Utah golf is much better off because of men like Dean Candland. Brigham City and Logan golfers owe so much to the life of Dean. His former players, like J. Don Blake and the rest, have all added to all of the world of golf. His former employees, now working in golf everywhere, are building the game and making it better every single day. Now, why don't we let him get back to his still busy, fulfilling life? And oh, by the way, watch out there on the range.
China, a train of Peru in a rusty old steamer or a leaky canoe.